Today, I want to help you turn your guitar parts from this to this. Most churches nowadays run two electric guitars on stage together, and there seems to be kind of this general approach. If you get scheduled for lead guitar, usually that means you're going to be playing way up high on the neck, way up here. And if you get scheduled for lead, then that just means you're going to be slamming chords the whole day. And I think this can generally get the job done. I think that's why we tend to gravitate towards that. But to me, just getting the job done isn't fun or inspiring. I don't really feel like that should be the goal. I feel like the goal should be to try to play as inspiring parts as possible that also serve the song super well. So for today, I have 4 tips that I want to show you for you lead guitar players, you rhythm guitar players, to combine forces to do just that together. Also, for you solo guitar players out there, I know there's plenty of churches that run just one electric guitar on a Sunday. And if that's the case, this video is still for you. Really, my hope for this video is that it's going to help you to mesh with the rest of the band super well, but also inspire you in your approach to guitar parts in general. Now, I want to make this super practical. So I'm going to be using this song Spirit Move by Bethel Music as kind of like a case study that we'll be working on. Bobby Strand and Michael Pope wrote the guitar parts for this song, and I just felt like they really utilized all of these tips super well that we're going to be talking about today. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to deconstruct the song and kind of write guitar parts for it that are going to be super basic, kind of like what you heard at the very beginning of this video. And step by step, we're going to be applying these tips throughout the video to kind of reconstruct it back to sounding really great like it originally does. So tip number 1, kind of where I really like to start if I am approaching guitar parts with another guitar player, is going to be positioning. Where is my hand positioned on the neck? Am I going to be playing up high, playing down low? This is something that's really important to decide pretty early on to determine what you're going to play. And like I mentioned earlier, this is kind of where there's some merit to like the traditional approach to rhythm and lead. There's usually some nice separation that can happen if one electric guitar player is playing a little bit further down lower on the neck, and the other player is a little bit higher up the neck. Ideally though, I think it's really important to choose positioning based on the right context. I don't really love the idea of just seeing the planning center request, and if it says rhythm guitar, I'm going to be playing chords the entire day. So the best way to identify what the context is to really use your ears and your eyes and kind of look around, look at the rest of the band, look at the other guitar player, and kind of decide and listen and see kind of what's going on here. So maybe a couple of examples of what you might notice is, let's say the other electric guitar player is scheduled for lead, but maybe he's down way low playing chords. So based on this context, I might adjust my positioning as the rhythm player and maybe play something a little bit more rhythmic, maybe a little bit higher up the neck. The goal is to just not get too muddied and step on each other's toes with the other guitar player. So that can be one way to kind of pay attention to what's going on. Is there a pretty significant melody between the vocals and the keys? Maybe the lead player is playing that melody and it maybe needs a little bit of backup. You could also play alongside the lead player, maybe play an octave below, and also copy that lead line as well. Or maybe even try harmonizing some parts. Listen to what the lead player is playing. If there's a pretty melodic line that they're playing, maybe there's an opportunity to kind of fill in a couple of harmonies there as well. So what I recorded earlier, like I said, it's kind of like our base deconstructed reference point. I kind of threw down like a classic rhythm line and a classic lead line. The rhythm I just have playing like pretty just big bar chords, kind of following the chord structure. And then I have the lead player kind of just playing some inversions a little bit higher up the neck. So here's just what that sounds like for reference. So you can hear everything is in tune. It sounds okay. There's just nothing really special going on. If anything, I feel like it's actually a bit blurry, a little bit muddy. There's a couple of points I think where the rhythm player and the lead player are kind of stepping on each other's toes and creating just a little bit of muddiness there. So the first thing that I want to do with this positioning is just create a little bit more space, a little bit more separation between the lead player and the rhythm player. So what I'm going to do is actually simplify both parts a little bit more. I'm going to simplify the rhythm part so that instead of doing full bar chords, I'm just going to be doing more power chords. So really it's just going to be, ones and fives. It's just really going to be pretty basic power chords. And then for the lead part, I'm actually going to simplify that a little bit more as well and bump it up a little bit higher. So that'll create a little bit more width. So here's what that sounds like. Now, I think there's some pretty nice separation now. I think it filled things out a little bit better, and it kind of feels like each player is kind of filling in their respective register a little bit more, but it just feels like things are driving this song way too hard. I think just kind of these slamming these eighth notes is just adding a little bit too much energy. This might be something that would work for maybe a bigger chorus or maybe like a building bridge or something like that, but this is a kind of a low-key chorus one. There's just sort of like a chill vibe to it. So I think I want to open up a little bit more space. So now that we're aware of our positioning, it's going to be really important to be intentional about what parts we're actually playing. And this might be one of the most important tips that I have. Really be intentional about every part that you're bringing into the song. And sometimes what you're offering might actually be silence. It might even be you not playing. I think sometimes there's a pressure that comes with being on stage and there's lights and there's people looking at you. I think sometimes there's this maybe nervous energy or this pressure where it feels like I have to be playing the whole time. I have to be playing something. And sometimes the best thing you can do for the song is to actually just turn your volume off and just let the song breathe a little bit. But again, this is where it's really important to use your ears. Whether it's not playing, maybe it's just playing a little bit less. This is kind of what we're hearing right now. I don't necessarily feel like for this chorus we're working on, we have to not play. But really those kind of driving eighth notes are a bit much. So maybe we can be intentional here to kind of like lessen that. But depending on the context, you might even need to play more. Sometimes there can be empty pockets of space where there's no vocals happening and there's just sort of an opportunity to just add a little bit of sonic interest or intrigue to the song. And that might be a good opportunity to maybe come up with a little melody, a little bit of a hook to kind of insert there. So again, it really kind of comes down to the context, serving the song well, serving the rest of the team, and kind of just paying attention to what's going on and then being super intentional about what you want to offer in that moment. A couple of other just kind of quick practical examples of being intentional. We talked about not playing, simplifying, maybe actually adding and inserting a part. I think another thing too is being intentional about what strings you're playing. I think sometimes too there's a tendency to want to just play all six. You don't have to play all six strings. We have six we can choose from. But we actually kind of did this a little bit ago by simplifying our parts a second ago by the rhythm player just playing three. Kind of the bottom three, just kind of lower power chords. And then also kind of simplifying up high too. So yeah, sometimes even simplifying how many strings we're playing is a great way to be intentional and serve the song super well. But to bring us back to kind of this example that we're working on, let's start with the rhythm first. There's something that just feels a bit aggressive about sticking with these power chords. It just doesn't really feel like it's serving kind of the groove for this song right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a capo on here and just kind of play some more open chords, but instead of driving, like we were saying, it's a bit too aggressive. Instead of driving kind of with that eighth note drive, I'm just going to play diamonds instead. Diamonds are basically just whole notes. I'm just going to play just a nice open chord and then just let it ring, kind of give it some breathing room. And then for the lead player, I'm going to do the same thing as well. It might sound, just as a fair warning, it's probably going to sound a little bit dry when you hear the soloed sections here, which is totally okay. We are going to cover effects like reverb and delay, how to use those well to kind of fill in some of the space. But for now, we're okay with it being dry. We're just trying to find the right parts to insert into this song that we're working on. So I'm just going to do some diamonds as well for this lead part. Let's listen to it now, see how things sound. So immediately this opens up way more space for the vocals. I think it matches kind of the mood of the song, kind of the vibe a little bit more. It feels like there's a lot more breathing room. It's kind of nice. It doesn't feel like it's driving so hard. The nice thing too with something like this as well in like a chorus one is, let's say maybe the song does pick way up in energy later down the road. now we kind of have somewhere we can go. You know, sometimes if we right off the bat in chorus 1, we start out huge and we're at 100%, you know, you can't really go much more past, you know, 100% as you kind of progress through the song. So it does sort of create a sense of, you know, we kind of have some room to grow if we need to down the road too. So I like kind of where we're at right now. Again, it sounds pretty dry. We're going to get to reverb and delay, don't worry. But before we get there, it's really important to be mindful about our timing. So when I say timing, I don't necessarily mean just being able to play in time, to play alongside the metronome. I do think that's super important. You definitely need to know how to do that, but that might be like a tip for another video. What I mean by timing in this sense is the timing of when are we playing, like on what beat are we coming in. This is actually a great way to kind of spice things up and again add like a little bit of this sonic interest. It can get kind of stale and kind of boring if every single instrument is just, you know, playing on the same exact beats. So maybe if you notice the rhythm player is playing on every downbeat, what would it look like for you instead of just coming on the downbeat as well? What would it look like for you as the lead player to maybe come in on the and, you know, maybe add a bit of a syncopated rhythm to it. Maybe try playing like a triplet or something like that to maybe just change up the timing. You don't even necessarily have to change up the notes that you're playing, but that might be a good way to add a certain amount of energy if you need that in the song, or again, just to kind of spice things up a little bit so it's not just so straightforward. So this is exactly what the original guys wrote for this song that we're working on. I think it's super, super well done. You know, kind of where we've just landed, where we just left off, is we're just playing diamonds. We're just kind of playing diamonds. There's a lot of open space, maybe even a little bit too much open space right now. So they really did a good job of syncopating when the rhythm player is coming in and when the lead player is coming in. So let's actually start with the lead section, what we're going to be doing here. We're actually going to simplify the lead even more and just have it be a bit of a lead line now. So what you're going to notice is the lead player is going to come in on the 1 and just have this one note kind of ring out. And we're going to add some effects in a little bit, but it'll just kind of ring out. The rhythm player is not going to come in on the 1. They're going to come in on the and. So it adds this really cool syncopated thing. And so the rhythm player is going to come in on the and then they're going to kind of walk up the chords a little bit and kind of add a little bit more intrigue there as opposed to just following the chord structure. So once the rhythm player kind of finishes this walk up in their chords, now there's a lot of empty kind of dead space. So that is where the lead player, who's kind of just been chilling this whole time, they're going to come in and kind of fill that space with a bit of musical intrigue as well. So here's just what that sounds like. So things are way more interesting now. We've kind of got this dance going on. You know, it's actually really cool to see both players kind of practicing stepping out while the other shows some restraint and doesn't really play, and then vice versa. You know, when one player is kind of done with their section and done being busy and they kind of let things ring out, the other guitar player is going to kind of step in and add a little bit of intricacy to their playing as well. So really cool to see kind of a lot of these tips being put into practice here. You know, there's a lot of intentionality being shown around when each player is coming in. They're really using timing well, kind of syncopating things when they are playing together to kind of create some more intrigue there. But they're also using positioning well too. You know, they're kind of covering their own spaces and filling out the mix super well. So this kind of brings us to our last tip here, and this is going to be the use of effects. I saved effects for last on purpose because I think this is probably the most emphasized thing, especially kind of in this worship genre. We love to talk about effects, but it's honestly debatably maybe the least important part of writing great guitar parts. You know, you can write great guitar parts without the effects. They can still be great parts, but you can't necessarily flip that around and do the opposite all the time. But when we have great parts at our disposal already in front of us, the use of effects can be an awesome way to kind of take them to the next level, like really level them up from good to great. And there's tons of effects out there. This could be its own video in itself, just talking about effects and kind of how to utilize them. So just for this video, I'm going to focus on delay and reverb because, you know, that's probably going to be the most use effects, especially kind of in this worship genre. But like things like chorus and vibrato, pitch, maybe like a higher octave, something like that can be great effects to use as well. But yeah, just for today, we're going to talk about reverb, delay, and then I'm going to use chorus just a little bit as well. So maybe just to touch on reverb and delay, just wet effects first. We kind of want to look back to the previous tips we've already talked about. I think intentionality is super important. I think a lot of times it's easy just to kind of jump into a Sunday and just have a super washy reverb. And this is just, we use it all the time. We use it if we're playing rhythm. We use it if we're playing lead. It's just sort of this one size fits all thing, which maybe you can get away with a little bit, but I think it really can help to serve a part well to just be intentional about, how much reverb does this actually need? Does this part need to be a little bit more kind of atmospheric or anthemic? Does it need this washy big reverb? Or am I kind of sticking to some more rhythmic, maybe like lower chords, things like that? Are they going to get drowned out if I add too much reverb? Maybe those should have a little bit less and just create a little bit of space, not necessarily use the reverb and delay for the effect in those moments. Another time to use a lot of reverb and delay might be if there's a lot of space in between notes. This might be a little bit of foreshadowing to what we're about to get to, but in this case, there's a lot of space, especially with that lead part that's just kind of playing that one ringing note up high. It's a great opportunity to add maybe a good amount of reverb and delay to kind of let that carry it into the next section, where maybe if you're playing a part that's really intricate and there's a lot of really fast playing, maybe that would also be a time to kind of, dial things back down just a little bit. I also mentioned modulation effects, chorus, vibrato, pitch effects like octaves are also super fun as well. For me, I like to use those maybe if I'm doubling a line, maybe I'm following a melody line with the piano player or maybe the vocals, adding just a little bit of vibrato or something to kind of help create a little bit of width, a little bit of difference in space between the two instruments can also be a good way to, again, kind of add a little bit of this sonic interest into the song, into your parts. Chorus too is another great way for a rhythm player to maybe stick out a little bit. And I don't say stick out in the sense of like, we just need to bring attention to the electric guitar player, but maybe there's a lot going on in kind of like the lower mids register. And maybe if you're just playing some chords, they're just going to get totally lost. So it could be kind of a cool way to maybe pick through the notes instead and add a little bit of chorus onto your rhythm guitar parts. And then that way you can add something that's kind of serving the song a little bit better, and you can kind of distinguish between the different instruments rather than just hearing kind of a muddled mess. So we're going to take a couple of those examples. We're going to kind of finish up reconstructing this song that we've been working on. Let's start with the lead part, kind of what we're going to do. I mentioned it a second ago, but there's a lot of space in between notes with this one. We kind of let these notes ring for the most part. So I'm going to add a good bit of reverb and a good bit of delay onto this, just to kind of help it carry and kind of fill that space just a little bit longer until we come in with that picking part. Now, the picking part is a little bit intricate. It's a little bit quick, but I think it's one of those things that the delay doesn't get too much in the way of it, and it's pretty short as well. I don't think it's going to get too clunky or messy or anything like that. For the rhythm guitar part, we're kind of picking through those notes where we last left off. So there's sort of a lot of busyness going on. I don't think it would serve it super well to add a ton of reverb here. So I'm going to dial back the reverb a good bit. And I'm also going to change up the delay. I'm going to use a shorter delay trail, and I'm also going to use an eighth. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I'm going to use a dotted eighth delay, tape delay for the lead part. For the rhythm part, I'm going to use an analog delay. So it kind of just, blends in a little bit more. It's not going to be so forward in the mix. And I'm going to use an eighth delay. So it's going to be pretty non-super noticeable. And then the last thing I'm going to add is a little bit of chorus. So just like I talked about, if there's sometimes a kind of a lot going on, maybe in that lower mids register, adding just a little bit of chorus can be a nice way to just kind of spice things up a little bit more. So here is how things are sounding with effects. Now, if you're still here, if you're still watching, there's one thing that I want to leave you with, and it's just to remember to have fun. There's no rules when it comes to playing guitar. I know we're talking about tips and maybe some examples of like what to do and what not to do, but take everything I say with a grain of salt. That's one of my favorite things about music. There's no rules. Just think of these as some ideas that you can just stick into your back pocket. And next time you get scheduled, next time you show up, you're playing with the other electric guitar player, and maybe you're noticing things are just a little bit stale, or you're just kind of playing the same parts that you're always playing every Sunday. Maybe pull some of these tips out of your back pocket and think about, how could I be inspired here? How could I maybe try changing up the timing, or being a little bit more intentional, or using effects in a different way to really serve the song super well, but also, be really inspired too, and love what you're doing. Now, go play your guitar. I'll see you in the next one.